Hey, everybody. Welcome back in another episode of the Wobcast 2.0, coming at you with lots of news and fun things to talk about in Vikings world. It's Wobby, joined as always by my partner and co-host Gyles, and we are excited to talk about it all with you. Thank you for joining. On the docket today, lots of stuff. We're going to get into mandatory minicamp and thoughts from what we've seen and what we've read there. We got new uniforms to discuss, an exciting new contract extension for Justin Jefferson, and I'm going to walk back an opinion I've had all offseason. A little bit of a mea culpa, a little bit of an awakening, and I think Gyles is going to support it and reference conversations we've had earlier in the offseason that sort of tie it all together. So we're going to get into all of that stuff today. To help me do it is my partner and co-host, Gyles. We bring him in right now. Hey, partner. How we doing?
Hey, happy Friday. It is a beautiful day here in the sunny land of Minnesota.
Finally.
And honestly, there's another reason that we should be incredibly excited for today, because yesterday, was it yesterday? Yeah. The day before, all the days are blurring together. Yeah. The Minnesota Vikings officially dropped their brand new whiteout jersey. And
what'd you think?
Oh my.
Okay.
I love it. I love it. I know a lot of people were on the fence about it. There's things they liked, things they didn't. But I am in absolute love with these jerseys. I can either confirm or deny. I have one on pre-order once they go. JJ McCarthy, you're going to be wearing on my back here. So okay. I'm really excited for these. I think they look absolutely sick. There's also some intricate detail if you've not looked into the mock-ups that they've posted very closely. Mm-hmm. But there is like Vikings lettering and stuff that's kind of in silver font. It's really, really cool. A lot of really interesting details that you might not notice at first, but I'm in love with these and I'm excited for Whiteout Night.
You're right about those details, Gyles. And, the Vikings have a design department, an internal design creative team. And when I was there, they called themselves True North Creative. I think they still brand themselves that way, but so they don't farm out the marketing, or they don't farm out the design of new uniforms, of helmets, of anything. The Vikings do that themselves in-house, and they do a great job of it. And so one of the writers with the Vikings Entertainment Network, Lindsey Young, a woman whom I worked with and hired at the Vikings, had some of those details in an article and was posting on social about it. So I'd encourage folks, you probably have already seen it, Gyles, but I encourage others to go check it out, because she talks about those details that you mentioned and how they sort of try to pull from history, pull from tradition, try and use some new modern concepts, weave it all together to create a new uniform. So it's not as simple as going to Microsoft Paint on the computer and changing the purple to white. It's a little bit more complex than that. Yeah. So it is very cool. And here's the other thing too. We've seen other teams go to all white uniforms, right? The Bengals did it. I think theirs look really cool. A lot of other teams have done it. Not every team can or should do this. As an example, one of our kids is a Packers fan. I know it sounds sacrilegious, but it happens. And so, he's like, do you think the Packers will ever do that? And I'm like, I never say never. But I don't know if I was running the marketing ship in Green Bay that I would say we're a brand that could do all white. I mean, they could do white pants on white uniforms, but this is a true whiteout of a uniform for the Vikings. And to me, the Packers are just too classic of a brand to do that. So I would advocate against that probably. The Vikings, however, can do it. But you're of the marketing and branding ilk for sure, Gyles, and I thought you would maybe have some commentary on that. The Vikings, certainly this fits their brand, right? Whiteout, winter, snow, ice, cold, that whole thing. It makes a lot of sense for the Vikings to do something like this.
It makes perfect sense, and I think they executed it perfectly, because I was concerned they were going to try to weave in too much yellow, and I think monochromatic is incredibly important when you're doing ice outs, and I think that was the quote-unquote issue with their whiteout uniforms last year, is there was just too much color happening, where it was all whites, but it was and I don't mean this as a complete slight to them, but kind of a lazy whiteout. This is an icy whiteout. You committed to this. I think this is the perfect hit. But in the same token, I do think you're absolutely correct. There's a lot of other teams that don't have the ability to do this, and I think the Packers would be on the top of that list. They're a very regal, standard, classic brand. I think it would look improper for them to do it. I think they could try it. It would just look wrong. There's too much intricate detail to what they have going on where it just wouldn't land very well. But I think that being said, I've seen stranger things happen because
Yeah.
whether you should or should not is one conversation, and whether you do it or not is another. Where even the Giants released their new, they're not a throwback jersey. Have you seen these?
I did, and they're going to wear them. They're going to wear them week 1, right? Yeah.
And I think they look horrible, to be honest. I think the tops are horrible. They tried to do too much in too little of a square footage, and then they put cream pants with it. I'm like, somebody made a horrible decision here. So a lot of teams, they feel like, oh, we need to put out something new, and they don't quite hit, but then they just push it out anyways. So it's not just meant to say that the Packers won't do it, but I think that they should not do it is maybe the better position to phrase it.
Yeah, it's a hard thing to articulate on. You just did a good job of it, but thinking very broadly, and branding and brand equity and building up trust with your constituency, it's not as simple as, just come up with something new all the time, because any sales more than 0 make it worth it. And that's not really the case, because you don't want to cheapen your brand. It's a little bit of like the boy who cried wolf theory, right? Like if you are continuously degrading the previous work, the previous brand with something new, eventually there's going to be an erosion of trust and an erosion of passion and excitement in your product. So you need to be careful and calculated when you do things like this. Mm-hmm. And I think that doing something like this would be would erode the Packers brand a lot faster and a lot more profoundly than it would the Vikings. It fits the Vikings brand to do an all white. It doesn't fit for some of the more classic brands. Like, I wouldn't want to see the Steelers do it. It doesn't. Now, they can do something alternatively to their uniform, but it needs to be, the Steel City. It needs to be manufacturing. It needs to be blue collar. It needs to be classic, throwback, something like that, as opposed to this, which can be sort of a modern, icy, cheek, cool look. So there's a science and an art to the whole branding, and I think the Vikings did a good job with this one, and every team's got to find their own niche,
Yeah. And one final piece on this that I am incredibly excited about comes to the helmet. And I have seen numerous, we'll call them 3D artists and artists in general, mock up what a future ice out, whiteout uniform could look like. And people would saying, hey, this is what it should look like. And pretty much all of the mock-ups that I had seen, the renderings, all had a white helmet, but with a purple horn. And although I understand that from a contrastual standpoint, you wanted some contrast on your helmet, I always thought that looked horrible, and I was always concerned that, are we going to make that same mistake too? And I'm so glad that we went with a white horn on the helmet. It makes it look so much more clean versus just forcing, hey, we made everything white. We just inversed everything, and here it is. It looks like it was custom designed, which further fills into the premium element of what the Minnesota Vikings are.
Yep, totally agree with you. I think the black, sort of the lining or the stitching, so to speak, I think does the contrast work well enough that I'm very happy for them that they didn't go purple horn. I think that would have been a mistake. And I'm sure they did some, I don't know if they did any crowdsourcing or what kind of testing they did. I would have to imagine that some people saw that and were like, that's not right. What they came up with looks right. I got to see it closer maybe. I don't know about this. There's a silver stripe down the middle of the helmet, right? I didn't look closely at that. I don't know how much I love that. I'm not going to criticize it yet because I haven't looked close enough to it, but it's not a pure all white helmet because there is the silver stripe down the middle. But, all in all, I think it's a very popular uniform. From what I can see, 80-90% people love it. So,
especially seeing either JJ suit up in that in 2024. I'm here for it.
Yeah, and that's a great segue, right, to the news that has happened since we last recorded, which was the Justin Jefferson extension, which is appropriate because the last time we did record, we both were trying to throw water on the idea that there's a 7-alarm fire here with Justin Jefferson not being signed. We both anticipated a new deal happening rather soon. I thought it was going to be August 1st. You wondered if it would be sooner, but we both agreed it would definitely be before the season, and it was in fact in time for mandatory minicamp. So Jefferson has been out on the field at minicamp this past week. It's a big number, Gyles. It's a big number from a cash and a signing bonus standpoint. I believe it was $88 million. It's a big number from a guarantee standpoint. I believe that came in at 114 or 120, and then total it was 140 some for 4 years. But he's under contract through 2028. Where does your mind go with that? I presume you don't have a problem with it. Do you view it as maybe you do? Do you view it prohibitive? Is it prohibitive in any way as you look at their cap situation? It seems to have opened up some cap space here in the near term. He gets mighty expensive in the long term and the last couple of years of the deal. But, you can always kick the can down the road and convert things to signing bonuses and all that stuff. But where'd your mind go with it? What'd you think of it?
Honestly, all the things you said are correct, but if I had to underscore it in a short way, I love this because he is the best non-quarterback in the NFL, period. I think pretty much everyone in the NFL would agree with you. He is the biggest inaccuracy eliminator, whether you have Sam Darnold throwing to him or JJ McCarthy. Yep. He has a contributing factor that allows us to win more football games, period, full stop.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, you have to look at pros, cons, all those things, but also opportunity cost. If you were to trade him or let him walk next season, what are you going to replace him with, right? And when you think about the amount of effort a defense has to put into stopping Justin Jefferson, that frees up guys like TJ Hawkinson or Jordan Addison or Aaron Jones. Like that's an important element there. So I am absolutely glad that they signed Justin Jefferson. Now, I think two additional things. One, to kind of reference our thought process on throwing water on his departure.
Yeah,
I think this deal was done a while ago, and they were putting it on ice. They had loosely agreed, hey, we're going to do it. But I think two things they were waiting for. One, they were waiting to see if anyone else signed for the $35 million. I bet they loosely agreed with a handshake. We're going to pay you $35 million. Here's kind of what it'll be. Unless someone comes out and signs another $35 million contract, then we're willing to renegotiate that to make you the highest non-paid quarterback. So I think they're waiting for that. But then secondly, and this is going to sound a little bit simplified, but I do think this factors into things. I think the Minnesota Vikings were waiting for the Timberwolves to be done because they didn't want to steal the thunder from them. Honestly, they wanted to let the Timberwolves have their day and then let Justin Jefferson's contract happen after they were done with the basketball season. Call me a homer, but I think that might play a factor in all this.
Sure, it certainly could. It could play a factor for the team. It could play. It could have been. Who knows? Who knows who would have that interest in it, right? There's multiple parties involved in doing a deal like this, from the agency to the player to the team to maybe others who are involved. So all really good thoughts. The number one thing for me, Gyles, that I wouldn't have anxiety over it either way, but for lack of a better term, that just eliminated anxiety was I knew from being connected to people that it was really, really close to being done last winter. They just didn't get over the hump. So the fact that framework was there and they had seeded the land in that way a year ago really put me at ease about it. And so if you're that close, if you're close enough to be able to say to people not involved in it, I thought we were done with it. I thought we had it done. If you were that far along that you can say that, there's almost no way it's not getting done. So I never really had serious anxiety. And then the other thing is you have O'Connell, who is, offensive minded head coach. You have sort of like pressure to win now, win immediately. There's just a little bit, they're not on the hot seat, but with the way last year went, it's just a little bit you're not in a place to trade Justin Jefferson and try and get better in a couple of years. So I just thought it was a great, perfect situation. I never really thought it wasn't going to get done. And that's sort of how it ended up playing out.
I also think people are maybe not as well acquainted with the individual details surrounding the numbers. People see $35 million a year. How in the world could you pay that to a wide receiver? And I think two things need to be called out there. One, he's the best at the position, so that needs to be called out. You're not paying the 12th best guy $35 million. You're paying the best guy, right?
Yep,
So that needs to be mentioned. But when you get into the intricacies of the numbers, this is where I think it gets interesting. Although I wouldn't inherently call this a team-friendly deal, you could make an argument that as the NFL moves forward, this is not a whatever the opposite of a team-friendly is, or team-friendly deal. Like, this is not horrible for the Vikings in the way that they've chose this to escalate. So in 2024, Justin Jefferson's final cap number will be $8.6 million, which is huge, right? In 2025, his cap hit is $15.1 million, which is also very fair. I mean, that'll be 5.8% of the existing cap. And now I'm going to talk a little bit more of the cap in here in a second, but 5.8 is low, okay? Especially for a person of his caliber. Then in 2026, it does escalate. It moves up to $38.9 million, which moves up to, at least with the current cap, 13.7% of the cap. And then 2027, it moves up to 43.4%, which is still at that 13-ish percent cap hit rate. And then in 2028, there's a $47 million cap hit, and then there's an extra void year on top of this. But this escalates in a way that initially sounds huge, right? Wow, he's going to make 38, 43, $47 million. But one thing that's important for this context is the cap for the NFL continues to skyrocket.
That's a good
This year
point,
alone, we added $30 million to the cap, right? Like, I fully anticipate that cap to escalate in a proportional way to this cap hit, where if he's making under 15%, I think you're okay. Do I want to pay 15% to one player? I'm not going to run out and do that, but it's not going to kill your team. And I think another final piece to all this that I think is very strategic on Rob Brzezinski's part and on Kwesi Adofo-Mensah's part is that Justin Jefferson's contract almost entirely lines up with JJ McCarthy's contract. And if you look at what the Chiefs did, right, that once they started paying Mahomes, then they said, all right, we're going to have to get rid of Tyreek Hill. We can't pay you anymore. But if we can pay Justin Jefferson while you have a rookie scale contract, now we have a 4 to 5 year window where we have control over all this, right? If you're going to pay a guy, we can make this work. And really, additionally, when you're looking at the numbers, there's only really 3 years of guarantee here. I know it's a 4-year deal, but he's only guaranteed through 2026. If you needed to get out of this contract in 2027, you could do that. Now, sure, you're going to take some cap hits. There's a few things in there, but there's ways to get out of this and give yourself flexibility. So I think the Vikings were very intelligent on this. They appeased Justin Jefferson. They gave him exactly what he wanted, as the highest non-quarterback paid person on the field, and still didn't shoot themselves in the foot when it comes to future years.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, you're right. The rookie contract is a big part of this, right? Because you don't like, look at what the situation the Cowboys are in right now with all the guys that they have to pay is tricky. They got a quarterback they have to pay, DeMarcus Lawrence. They have Micah Parsons coming up, CeeDee Lamb coming up. Like, the Cowboys are in a sticky wicket right now, and it's because they've drafted well. I mean, so that's good. They got a lot of players that they need to pay, and one of them being the quarterback, which is obviously the big one. The Vikings are not going to be in that spot. We've referenced a lot the spot the Seahawks were in when they had Russell Wilson on that rookie contract and what they were able to build around him because they didn't have to pay Wilson a ton of money. That's what the Vikings are in. So you've got Jefferson, Hawkinson, Darisaw, you name it, other players, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Eventually, you hope that some of these players you're drafting on defense play in requisite to having a big contract themselves, and you're more flexible and able to do that because of the McCarthy situation. So I think that's a really good point that you brought up there at the end. So when I first saw it, I was like, this is what it costs to have Justin Jefferson. And it's like what we talked about with the draft in the first round, where the Vikings paid a steep price to trade up and get McCarthy, to trade up and get Dallas Turner. But what's wrong with going to Manny's and getting the best steak on the menu, right? It's not like, you overpaid for a steak at, a chain restaurant. Like, you're paying for a steak for Manny's. And that's kind of what you're getting with Jefferson. So I liked it from that standpoint too. And, the other thing is, culturally, Gyles, like, you can't pay everyone. Everyone knows that. But the real ones you want to pay. You don't want to be the team that won't pay the real ones, because other players around the league, like, they pay attention to that, right? Like, It's like, That's not a great environment. You want to be like the Vikings take care of their own. And so I think that's a part of this as well. And that's also interesting. This never got acrimonious, right? There was no negotiating in public. There was no threat of a holdout, really. There was none of that, and I think that was probably another indication that was positive, that you never really felt like this was a possibility to end in a stalemate and a release or a trade, because it never got the temperature never rose with the rhetoric publicly.
Yep. And I think that further kind of backs into the brand of the Minnesota Vikings, like we were talking about with the jersey release. Yeah. They have prioritized in all the right ways the desire to be a premium brand, and the way that they talk about players, the way that they expect players to talk about the organization. If you have a beef with us, we'll talk about it, but that never gets aired out publicly, right? We'll have a discussion, we'll negotiate, we'll get where we need to be, but let's all be professionals about this. Let's keep a premium brand, a premium environment. We hold the culture of the room very, very near and dear. So I'm excited to see this is another example where we've held ourselves to a good standard. So really, really excited about that.
Me too. Last thing really quickly on this before we move on to minicamp. Who's next, do you think? Darrisaw?
I think so. There's a chance they wait until the next offseason, because I think Darrisaw had, this is weird to say this out loud, but he had a down season last year. And he was still a top 10 tackle, but he had a down year. He just struggled with a little bit of injury. Even when he was on the field, he pushed through it. He was clearly struggling with injury. I think he, from a monetary standpoint, has an interest in putting better tape on the field and then signing a deal next offseason. But you could make a pretty strong argument that he's going to need $25 million in order to stay on the Minnesota Vikings side of the fence.
But we're gonna be singing the same tune with him as we are with Jefferson. You have the rookie contract on the quarterback, which is the big one, and left tackle's a premium position. You got to do it, right? Yeah. Yep. I mean, we're gonna be singing the same tune. You gotta let go of things you like at other positions to keep the thing you love at the premium position. It's a good position in which to be. So yeah, I think that Darrisaw is next, and you do have to make those aren't hard. Paying Jefferson is not a hard decision. Paying Darrisaw is not a hard decision. The hard decisions are, who do you let go of to make it happen? Because if there's probably a good player that you're going to be unable to retain, because you need to retain the great player. Those are the hard decisions to make. But I don't think Darrisaw will be a victim of that. I think he'll be one that they keep on the reservation, so to speak. All right, so minicamp. Really the only thing that's really notable to me, other than a couple of guys who are unavailable and not practicing, one, Hawkinson, we were pretty sure would be the case. I didn't know that Andrew Van Ginkel would be unavailable. I didn't study up enough on that. So hopefully he gets back and he's ready to go for the season. But to me, the main thing from minicamp, and I think about this a lot because I listen to Sirius NFL Radio, and they've had a couple of Vikings reporters on recently talking about the team minicamp and their thoughts. And no one is really suggesting or predicting or thinking that McCarthy is going to play right away. I'm really sensing, I'm downright reading and in other ways sensing this is really Sam Darnold is going to start the season. So I've prepared mentally for that. That's what I expect. And so that was sort of a little mini revelation maybe over the last week, where it's 25% chance McCarthy wins the starting job, 75% chance it's Darnold. I'm more 90-10 now. In fact, I saw that McCarthy was running with the threes at times. Now, this is not an indictment on him at all. He's a rookie quarterback. This is where he should be. But, you get the buildup and the hype and the excitement when you draft a quarterback in the first round, in the first half of the first round, and it's he's going to start. He's going to be our guy right away. And to me, it's very clear that's not happening. Darnold will start. And then before I sort of give you the floor on this too, the other side discussion with this is, it might be Darnold, but they have an early bye. That'd be a time to prepare them, or they might start 1-4. And I'm there's no easy part of the schedule to get to get McCarthy in there. If you're looking for a soft spot on the Vikings schedule, that does not exist in the first 2 months. I mean, it's for a third place team, they've got a pretty tough slate of games. So I'm pretty certain we're not seeing McCarthy this year unless the season's gotten out of hand and they're eliminated or injuries happen. Short of those two things, I don't think we're going to see McCarthy much, if at all. I think it's going to be Darnold's show. So that's my main observation or takeaway from this week, mini camp and listening and watching.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely correct. As much as we may want to see McCarthy on the field, I think it's pretty evident now based on the publicized version of rookie minicamp, actual minicamp, that McCarthy is very focused on fundamental, foundational things right now, and they don't want to let that distract from learning the playbook. They need the offense and the first team to move forward. So I think, much like in the conversation we had last week, he needs to focus on that before he can really focus on executing the playbook versus we need to refine our mechanics. That's why he's sitting at QB3, not because he's not performing well, because they're looking to remove all the pressure. Let's fix this. Let's get it right. I mean, not to make an extreme comparison, but that's exactly what they did with Patrick Mahomes. He had mechanical issues, extreme freak athlete, had amazing accuracy when required, but he had some fundamental things that need to be fixed, and they didn't want to force that. So they let him sit obviously under Alex Smith, and that worked out pretty well. Now, that's not predicting that JJ McCarthy is going to be Patrick Mahomes, but they're trying to take that formula, right? They don't want to rush it. They don't want to force him to learn a bad habit. So I think that's absolutely correct. And I think the same thing can also be true. Sam Darnold is looking very good in practice. Like, I mean, I won't be the guy that say I've watched a ton of training camp tape from the Jets days, but based on what I've seen in games from those seasons, he's looking way better. And obviously he has the best infrastructure around him right now. So I think both things can be true, that JJ McCarthy, as sad as it is to say, he's going to sit probably for this season because of all the reasons you mentioned. There's not a good place to set him in. And if you're going to start this season, they'd want him to start out pretty early because you need to spend training camp learning the playbook and learning timing and all those things with your first team offense. If you don't get that, that's a lot harder for a rookie, right? It just is, right?
Yep.
It's pretty severe to ask them to jump in mid-season without learning training camp and getting up to speed with the first team. Now, unless we get to training camp and we see that they're splitting reps with the ones, maybe I'll take a different position. But based on what we're seeing now, I expect Sam Darnold to start.
Me too.
So I think that's important. I do think, for the other things that you mentioned, Andrew Van Ginkel, he did have a foot injury in the last game of the season for the Dolphins, or the second to last game. So I think he's still lingering with that. With that being said, I still think I'm hearing word that there's a chance he starts on day one of training camp. Now, that's maybe a little bit aggressive, but I do hope that exists. But I know a few others in the Minnesota media have speculated on this. They wondered if that was one, why Andrew Van Ginkel came at such a cheap price tag, because there's question marks on his availability day one because of the foot injury. And secondly, is that why they went and got Dallas Turner? Now, I disagree with that second part. I think they were planning to get Dallas Turner if you could get him, but they wanted a third guy in case Andrew Van Ginkel wasn't available. So I'm really hoping that all that washes out and we have three solid guys, because I truly believe Andrew Van Ginkel is a top-rated edge rusher and he'll do phenomenal in our system, but definitely a storyline to keep apprised of. And I know there's a topic that you want to talk about, and this kind of blends together, and that is N'Keal Harry.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
With some recent updates on N'Keal Harry, he's recently switched over to the tight end position, which is very intriguing.
So I like this. So the concept of changing positions for a player. Now, this is much offensive line coaches or offensive linemen might take exception to this, but this is not, taking a center and making him a guard, or a guard and a tackle, or a right tackle to a left tackle. Changing positions from wide receiver to tight end is a significant. Now, going from the right side to the left side, also a significant change. Not downplaying that or saying it's easy. That's a tough one for tackles. I get that. But, this is a major change. I like the concept because it's like, hey, they obviously like him as a person and a teammate. They think he's got a skill set they can utilize, but he just couldn't quite cut it at the position he was in. So instead of waving the white flag and cutting him, they are reimagining his role. So I like that creativity. And when you look at the Vikings tight end room, Gyles, it's funny. They have TJ Hawkinson, who's probably a top 5 pass catching tight end in the NFL. But after that, you don't really love the pass catching situation at tight end. You love them as blockers and as dudes and blockers and run game guys and glue guys. You love that room. That's a great room. Yeah. But in terms of route running and explosiveness, you don't love it after Hockenson. But N'Keal Harry gives you a quick way to sort of give them a little bit of an edge when it comes to, the passing game without having to go and sign someone. So, with him doing this, with the addition of Tunyon, I think they're okay at this position while Hockenson is healing. So I don't know that there's a lot of great examples historically of this working, but that doesn't mean it won't work for you or you shouldn't try it. It still could be the best route to go.
And I think you're hitting on a point that's important to make, in the idea that historically a positional switch is like, this is a last ditch effort. You're a nice guy. I want to give you a chance.
Yes.
I actually think this is that, but this is also not that, because according to what I've been hearing, Kevin O'Connell actually went to N'Keal Harry last season and said, hey, you are a huge dude. You are an above size or above average size wide receiver. You're 6'4". I forget his exact weight. You are great. You're a former first round pick, right? You have high potential. The one thing you struggle with is separation. Yep. And when you're trying to separate from these incredibly fast NFL cornerbacks, you can't get separation. Yep. Everything else, you have amazing hands. Like, you have all the things. Let's make you a tight end. Okay, so two things to know about that. One, he came to him last season. So now it's not like they decided last week, you should be tight end. You should start doing that now. He's already been spending almost a year practicing and building up for the tight end position. They just didn't talk about it. Yeah. He has been putting on weight. He's put on over 10 pounds since that happened. He has been preparing to be the blocking side of a tight end. That guy is massive. I don't know if you've seen him in minicamp. That guy's a big dude. I am very excited to see what he puts on the field. So exciting to see that part. I think most people that are calling out, you can't switch positions like that this early into the season. It happened last season. They're just talking about it now. But the second thing, and this is the most exciting part, he couldn't get separation with cornerbacks. He's now having to get separation as a tight end with linebackers. Yeah. I actually think there's a pretty high probability that this actually is a very good switch for him. He has all the capabilities to be a great tight end and be a pseudo like a tight end 2B, right? If you consider Josh Oliver tight end 2A, I think this becomes very intriguing. Now, obviously, there's a lot of ways that this could fail, but if I'm looking at the formula here, I'm really in love with this. I think there's a really intriguing option that this could put on the field because he understands the route running of a wide receiver. That's a nuanced thing that he does well. It's just he couldn't beat out cornerbacks. But if you have a linebacker, those guys are much slower. So this could be very interesting.
Yeah, it could be. And it does sort of tie into the opinion I was gonna walk back with you because it relates to the pass catching situation. And that opinion is, I really thought, I'm like, they need another wide receiver. They need WR3. I'm not convinced that they have the guy. But that opinion is based on a premise that there's going to be a high frequency of times in which a third wide receiver needs to be on the field, meaning you're going to be an 11 personnel team, 1 back, 1 tight end, 3 receivers. Yep. And I think the awakening for me is, I don't know if we're going to be an 11 personnel team, Gyles. You don't think so either, do you? Now you've been on this since we signed
Josh Oliver.
Oliver, yeah. You've been a big 2 tight end, whether it's 1 back and 2 tight ends or 2 backs and 2 tight ends, so 12 or 23 or 12 or 22 personnel. So you've been on this for a while, and I'm kind of fully getting on there. I don't where O'Connell comes from is Sean McVay, most recently. And there was a period of time where McVay and the Rams were the clip at which they were running 11 personnel, it was like 80% or more in McVay's offense. Now McVay's come away from that a little bit as well, but I think O'Connell never approached that and never will here, at least not this season. It looks to me like they're gearing up, Gyles, to not be an 11 personnel team. They're gearing up to not be a running team, but to at least present as an offense that will challenge you in that way every week. And maybe it's 11 personnel 50% of the time some games, but a lot of games it's under 50% of the time. And there's going to be 2 tight ends out there quite a bit. And in that scenario, I definitely feel they are adequately adequate depth and skill at wide receiver the way they are.
Yep. I completely agree. I was actually going to make that comment. I've said for a long time, as long as you have the right personnel, which is an important piece here. You can't just have, well, I have one good guy and the rest are slappy, so I'm trying to run this strategy. You can have a great strategy, but not have the resources to execute it. If you have the right roster, if I had to pick a dream roster and a dream schematics to run for my offense, it will always be 12 personnel, because there are a lot more options that you can run as a 12 personnel unit, because you can run the ball more effectively if you have tight ends that can catch the ball. And both tight ends are equal blockers and pass catchers. It's impossible for the defenses to figure out how to stop you. And then you don't have to switch out the people. So if I have to pick, 12 personnel is the way to go as long as you have the right people. So if we walk through our roster, is Justin Jefferson good? Yes. Well, he just got paid, so we'll assume that's a yes, okay? Yeah. Jordan Addison, he had an amazing first season, and based on rookie minicamp and minicamp, people are saying that Jordan Addison is looking even better than he did in his first year. So we have wide receiver checked, all right, from a 12 personnel, 2 wide receivers, 2 tight ends, and running back. Running back, we have Aaron Jones. I mean, until proven otherwise, he is a top 5 running back, or maybe top 10 if you want to call it that. But he was number 1 in every statistical category in the last part of last season. So he is a check mark. You're checked. You have a guy in that way that is ready to perform at a high level. Yep. Tight end, you have TJ Hawkinson. He's a top 3 tight end, top 5 pass catcher. He is an amazing tight end. So then the other category is your second tight end. That's either Josh Oliver, or in this case, is it either Robert Tonyan or N'Keal Harry, right? And maybe that's a rotation. But if you have a guy that can adequately and equally block and pass catch, you have now built the ultimate formula for 12 personnel. That is a phenomenal scenario. You have an emerging offensive line. Obviously, the left guard position, we're trying to figure out what that looks like between Dalton Reisner and Blake Brandel. But you at least don't have a train wreck of an offensive line. Can we make improvements? Sure. But if you can make that work, you have built an amazing formula. That's how the 2007 Patriots went undefeated in the regular season. Seriously.
Yep.
12 personnel.
Yeah. I think you're totally right. It takes away, if you're a big time 11 personnel team, I want to make sure I say this the right way. Let's go the other way. When you are a 12 personnel team, it makes you less predictable when you have run game personnel on the field. It makes you more capable to be a passing team with your base personnel, right? So if you know, hey, we need to pass here, we need to pick up this 7 yards, it's 3rd and 7. If you're not, I mean, how about being in 12 personnel on 3rd and 7? Or even better yet, how about being in 12 personnel on 3rd and 4? Now you really have the defense in a sticky wicket, right? Because the defense is sitting there being like, well, yeah, this is a running personnel group, but they pass out of 12 all the time. So we can't assume they're running here on 3rd and 4 because they pass out of 12 all the time. Yeah, so I think you're right. It's the way to be, and maybe O'Connell has seen that. But they're definitely gearing up from a personnel standpoint to be a 12 personnel team here to me. And I don't know what that means for CJ Ham. It might be the end of the road for him, and that'd be too bad if it was. I like CJ as a person and player. But there's still room for it. You can be a 12 personnel team and have a fullback, certainly. The addition of Aaron Jones, what they're doing at the tight end position, they've got the look and feel of a 12 personnel team, which to me means with Sherfield in the fold and Brandon Powell in the fold, I think they are adequately equipped at WR3. So I totally walk back and stand down from that opinion. If they were going to be an 11 personnel team, I think they'd have a problem. I don't think they're good enough at receiver to be an 11 personnel team, but dummy me, they're not an 11 personnel team. They're a 12 personnel team, which is how Gyles wants them to be. And which I think is smart for them, especially in the division they're in. I think it makes sense to be a 12 personnel team in the division because when you operate when you build to be a 12 personnel team, you practice that way, you get a little edge physicality, you get a little stuff on your nose, as they say. And I think that's a good brand of football to play in the NFC North right now with what else is going on. The Lions have a little bit of that to them. I think the Bears are going to have some of that to them. So I think it's a good style and brand for the Vikings to have. So anyway, we'll talk more about personnel groupings and how it's going to fit and who's going to make the roster and all that down the road, Gyles. But I think for now, we can cool the jets on needing a wide receiver and be happy with Powell and Sherfield and see what they can do with those reps. Because honestly, I think Trent Sherfield has been a really good player for a while. He just doesn't get a lot of opportunity in reps. I thought he was really good in Miami when he was playing behind Waddle and Hill. But I mean, how many throws are you going to get when you're playing behind those two guys? Now, he's behind Addison and Jefferson here, but I think he can fulfill the role of WR3 really well. And it won't surprise me if he edges out Powell. I think Powell still has a great role on the team as a special teamer and as a WR4, but I think Sherfield will be the guy at WR3. All of that to say, once Hawkinson is back and healthy, Tunyon, Hawkinson, Oliver, that's a nice tight end room, plus Muse and Munt for some depth. Obviously, Aaron Jones and CJ Ham, Jefferson, Addison, Powell, Sherfield. I mean, you can win games. It's a tough schedule, I get it, but you can win games with Sam Darnold as your quarterback with that as the surrounding cast, so long as what you said happens and that the offensive line is not a train wreck. Just don't be a train wreck, and I think you're going to be okay on offense.
100%. And I have a last parting thought that is definitely a bold prediction, hot take. But the Minnesota Vikings, as of June 7th, 2024, have $26 million in effective cap space this upcoming season. Does another shoe drop here before training camp? And that could be a free agent signing. Heck, that could even be a trade from another team to acquire a player in a short-term capacity that requires a big cap hit to make us a more effective team this year. So it doesn't have to be an answer today, but let that noodle on your brain.
We should do that.
I mean, $26 million is not nothing.
That's right.
Is that accidental? I mean, I'm usually of the opinion that Rob Brzezinski is, one, a brilliant man, and two, does nothing by accident. We don't accidentally stumble our way into $26 million in effective cap space. That tells me that there might be another move to be made.
Interesting. So we will noodle on that and talk more about it in future episodes. We don't have to drill deep right now on that, but I like the thought, Gyles. Two things on that. Three things on that. One, extensions. You can do deals with players already on the roster. Two, some of those ancillary players, like Cam Akers, right? So there might be signings like that you can use that money for. But three, you can roll that over to future years, right? Yeah. So you have a better sort of a little nest egg for future years. So I wonder if that's part of the plan. If Possibly. They're sitting there being like, they might have someone in mind who they want to sign. I'm not saying they won't, but they might be like, next year we've got a long checklist, right? We got a long checklist next year of things we got to get done. We got to extend Darrisaw. We got to extend this guy. We got to extend that guy, right? So they might be thinking the rollover. I can't remember what percentage of the cap you can roll over from year to year. But I
don't remember the exact number.
Yeah. But you're right that $26 million is not like 12 million, 8 million, 10 million. It's common to just leave that in reserve for the season, right? But 26 million, you can do something with. That's a chunk of change you can do something with, right? Yeah. So
go get a right guard.
Yeah, that's what I was going to do. I was going to joke while you were talking, like Google's available centers, right? Like, like sorry, Garrett Bradbury, but like who's out there? Go get your guy JC Treader. Just kidding. But but yeah, the thing with the O-line addition is you're getting to the point where it's like you want to get your O-line guys in here, because like you want to get them
training camp.
Yeah, you want to get them going. So if they do a move like that, I wonder if it'd be on defense.
possibly for like a nose tackle or a defensive lineman of some sort.
Yeah. I don't know. It'll be fun to watch. Something we can talk about maybe in the next episode of the Wobcast. But because $26 million is something you can play with. But I think for today, my notebook is empty. That's all we had. The big thing for me was to like not apologize for the WR3 opinion, but to walk that back. I'm no longer gonna be loud about that. I think we're good. I think we got the weapons we need, Gyles. I think we're good there.
We do. And I think just to make sure the audience is aware, for the next episode of the Wobcast 2.0, we will be having an official roast of Mike Wobschall. So tune in. It's going to be great.
Yeah, that's right. There's something about the idea of, I'm not saying they want to like slow down on offense and not score a bunch, but like there's something about being like, okay, 12 personnel, let's be balanced, let's be physical, let's be able to run the ball. That just is a little soothing if you're playing Sam Darnold or if you're playing a rookie, as opposed to if it's Cousins, and it's like the sirens are going off and it's Cousins and let's like bomb the ball down the field. We got to score 30 points. Like you're not putting pressure on Darnold and McCarthy to do that. So I like that. So I sort of like this new style or this new philosophy that O'Connell and the Vikings have with 12 personnel. So anyway, we'll talk more about that later. That's going to do it for this episode of the Wobcast 2.0. We thank you for listening. If you don't like, follow, subscribe, comment, and engage with us on all the places where the Wobcast 2.0 is. We encourage you to do so. So if this was your first time or if it was the first time in a long time, please like, follow, and subscribe. The Wobcast 2.0, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok. We try to be everywhere, so come join the conversation. We love it when you do that. And when you do that, we'll see you on the next episode of the Wobcast 2.0, which will come at you next week. On behalf of my partner and my co-host, Gyles, this is Wobby signing off for now. Until next time, Skol Vikings.